today what I'm going to do is I'm going to decide the 3 best Genesis albums from the peak period. Now, peak period is a very hard thing to define, especially when it comes to Genesis, as every man and his dog has a completely different opinion on what the peak period is. You'll ask all the proggy nerds that the peak period started and ended with Peter Gabriel. You'll also have the virtuoso group of people that think that when Steve Hackett was in the band, so from Nursery Cryme all the way through to Wind Wuthering, is the peak period. Well, I think there's a bit of a mix. And of course there's the Phil Collins era, but it's not my scene, not my cup of tea, not the sort of music I listen to. So I think I'd be a bit of a liar if I even attempted to talk about Abacab or the self-titled or We Can't Dance or Invisible Touch. I simply haven't listened to them past one listen. I had to have one listen to make sure that I at least had a valid opinion, but you never know. Like, there's things that I've heard that, like, Jesus, He Knows Me and such from I Can't Dance is, like, actually okay. It's not. It sounds like early 90s, overproduced, overlong. Like, look, I like long, but I'm talking like overlong in the sense that it doesn't earn its existence or its runtime. So for me, the peak period is between 1970 and 1976. And that consists of every album between Trespass and Wind Wuthering. So it might be clear that I have a different definition of what the peak period is to some of the more standard points of view. Phil Collins and Steve Hackett weren't in the band for Trespass, but there's still some actual good classic songs on there, like The Knife and such. And then, of course, through to Wind Wuthering means that I enjoy at least a couple of the albums after Peter Gabriel has left the band. So, again, this is my arbitrary kind of definition. If it was from beginning to Wind Wuthering, I'd have to include from Genesis to Revelations. I don't want to do that. And if I were to end when Peter Gabriel left, I would be missing out on Trick of the Tail and Wind Wuthering, which I actually quite enjoy. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to spin the wheel and I'm going to give my opinions on that album. Okay, Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. This one is a bit of an interesting one. I remember when I was a bit of a noob to Genesis, this was the one that I was told I had to listen to. And I think that telling people to start with The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway is either a sick joke or for people who don't really enjoy prog. First of all, it's very long. Like, it's a double album. That inherently is a bigger commitment and a bigger ask for people to get into. It's also not the most indicative of their prog sound. It has a bit more of an R&B. Well, R&B is not the right word. It has a bit more of like a bluesy sort of Americana feel to it compared to some of their other more English prog stuff. But it's also got filler. It's like, don't get me wrong, for a double album, it's pretty darn great. For a Genesis album, I think that it is a little too long for my taste. I think it's really hard to justify a double album for me. I'm not one that likes many of them. And Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, I'll listen to it when I'm in a bit of a deep diver and I'm in a bit of a specific mood. But I won't just put on The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway if I'm just sitting down to listen to a record, wanting to enjoy the next 45 minutes with music that I love. It's a bit of an emotional commitment. And in terms of the virtuosity, I think it's goes up its butt a little bit. So for me, I'm actually going to straight away put Lamb in 3. I don't think it's going to stay in 3. As you can see here, I've got a tier list from 1, 2, 3, and then I've got the Shadow Realm. So the Shadow Realm is where all of the items that I don't think necessitate my favorite 3 Genesis albums will go. So eventually as we go on, you'll see the logic as I go from 1 down to 3 and then into the Shadow Realm. So yeah, what have we got next? Okay, so we've got Trespass. I made an assorted effort to include Trespass here because I think there are some fans and some apologists for Trespass, but it also doesn't really get mentioned in the same conversation as, say, from Nursery Cryme through to Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. And I think that's a little bit of a shame because in terms of musicality, in terms of what it actually can deliver, it's a pretty good album. It's a pretty fun album, and I think it might be held back a little bit by, of course, its drumming. Phil's not there, and I think, you know, you might be able to make a claim that Steve's guitar work, which is also missing, is intrinsic to the band, or the whimsy and frontmanship of Peter Gabriel. But at the end of the day, I think without Phil, there is definitely a very big piece of the puzzle missing when it comes to Genesis, and that is the main Achilles heel for Trespass. Other than that, though, it's a step up from Genesis to Revelations. It's like a pretty good overall experience. And yeah, so again, I'm coming from, I've labeled this the good years, so it might be very clear that I actually have quite a fond opinion of all of these albums, but it still has to be compared to a lot of the other ones. So I'm just going to pop Trespass straight in the Shadow Realm. It doesn't make the top 3. It doesn't have the chops to even be considered amongst the top 3 like Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Yeah, again, The Knife's good. I think the first Genesis album I ever heard was The Knife, and I'm talking in a world where Invisible Touch exists. I kind of just missed a lot of that 80s pomp and circumstance pop music stuff. I just didn't have a mum who listened to it or a dad who listened to it. My dad was too busy listening to Deep Purple and The Who. So I missed the 80s Genesis period. I didn't have that on rotation in my home. So when a friend of mine showed me The Knife, I was like, this is very cool. So it'll always hold that place in my heart as the place that I kind of tentatively started. Listened to The Knife. I put on the record after that, and I didn't grow to like it for another decade. So it actually did result in me not getting super into Genesis very early, and I think it had to do with the production as well. It sounds very tinny and a little bit raw. So what have we got next? Okay, Selling England by the Pound is one of my favorite albums of all time. I'm going to just pop it straight in 1. I don't see it leaving 1 at any point. It has the fun, dynamic musicality of Genesis. It has the whimsy, the fey whimsy that I think makes up the best portion of Genesis's output from Nursery Cryme through to Selling England by the Pound. It also, in terms of like its lyrical content and in terms of the stories it's telling, each song on that album clearly tells a confined story. And I think that is what I like about it. It's the prog virtuosity, it is the soundscapes, it's the crazy playing, but it's also mixed with bite-sized, comprehensible pieces of Peter Gabriel telling some fun, interesting, very British stories. All of those together, and the album artwork, I think just everything I hear about it. I want to have I Know What I Like in Your Wardrobe as one of my wedding songs, just because it's sweet, it's cute, and yeah, this record lives in my personal favorites area. I'm very anal when it comes to like making sure that all the records live with their brothers and sisters, but when it comes to it, if you are one of my top albums, you have to live in a different section, and Selling England by the Pound sits right next to my Wish You Were Here Brighter Later by Nick Drake, and all the other little albums that are very important to me. So what have we got next? Okay, Foxtrot. So Foxtrot is the one that I am told more than any that I need to love. And I really like Foxtrot. I have a lot of fun when I listen to it. There is definitely a step up in terms of the recording compared to Nursery Cryme to Foxtrot. It sounds a lot cleaner and a lot more polished, but not losing the edge that you kind of need to be rock and roll. It doesn't sound like AOR or anything like that. But saying that, I don't find myself getting attached to any of the songs. You know, that there's Suppers Ready. There's all these classic tracks on that album. And in terms of just like heaviness, like it does hit you in the heart when you listen to it. It's very raw in that sense in terms of the energy that it brings. But for me, I'm in the minority. I'm in the minority, and I think that Nursery Cryme is actually a superior record. So usually those two in my brain are sibling pieces. Those two, they kind of inspire a very similar feeling in me between those two. And I think I'll always reach for Nursery Cryme more. So where does it go? I think Foxtrot goes in 3, and I know this is a controversial thing, but it bumps Lamb Lies down into the shadow realm, just narrowly missing the top 3. So what have we got now? Okay, so Trick of the Tail. I was very pretentious when it came to this album, and I avoided listening to it for a very, very long time. I avoided listening to anything past, even, let's be real, even I kind of wasn't really keen on listening to anything past Selling England by the Pound, because I had found 3 albums in particular that I really loved in Nursery Cryme, Foxtrot, and Selling England by the Pound, that I was worried that if Peter Gabriel's not there, then I'm going to hate it. It's giving me flashbacks to when I did, in fact, go and explore a bit of Phil Collins era Genesis, and it wasn't for me. So I was scared that from Lamb, after Lamb, that their output just went down the toilet and there wasn't anything worth listening to. And one day I was in a record shop and Trick of the Tail was there, and I Googled it, and I had a very short read about the album, and outside of course them saying it's a great comeback, or Genesis aren't dead, all that sort of stuff, what I liked to read was that it was like them trying to do Selling England by the Pound again. And that tickled my pickle. That very much was like, okay, I'll give it a go. And the fact that the album was $10 meant that I wasn't really gambling too much money on if I liked it or not. So yeah, I took it home, I listened to it, and I thought it was very, very good. I think I'll save my Wind and Wuthering opinions until we get there, but for me, I got a brand new respect for Phil Collins, because again, I assumed he was the Susu Studio sort of guy, and I thought that if he was singing, the music would just be about his divorces and all that sort of, all the cliches that come with Phil Collins. But he's singing like squonk, like a lot of the songs are still really weird, fey prog, and the musicianship is also just still very fantastic on the album. So I think for me, in terms of the ranking, I'm going to do another weird little one here, and I'm going to put Trick of the Tail in 3. which I know I mentioned that I grew into a Genesis fan with the quintessential three for me, which are Foxtrot, Nursery Cryme, and Selling England by the Pound. But as I've gotten older, as I've listened to them more, I think I've developed a bit of there's like a clear differentiation between the albums. And I think because Foxtrot to me is a little too similar to Nursery Cryme, it's not nearly as interesting. So it goes into the Shadow Realm, and Trick of the Tail is now sitting in my third spot. What have we got now? Okay, Wind Wuthering. This is another one that I think gets a bit of a bad rap. It's, even for those who love Trick of the Tail, I think Wind Wuthering is whispered in a smaller, it's kind of like a B-side. I know that sounds really weird to say, but it's kind of like a B album to Trick of the Tail's A album. And while I kind of understand that, it does feel like a bit of a lesser record. It's not nearly trying to be as epic or as in your face. I really like the tone of this album. I think it sits in a way in its own new category outside of, say, Trick of the Tail's attempt at doing Selling England by the Pound again. It does try to be its own entity, and while that's admirable and while that's interesting and enjoyable, I listen to Wind Wuthering more than I listen to Lamb. It is a lesser record. It is a bit more insignificant. It's one that I don't find myself thinking about until I'm given the choice of listening to it or not. It's kind of there. Like, oh yeah, Wind Wuthering, I'll put this on and I'll listen to it and I'll enjoy it. And then, like object permanence of music, I'll put it away and I won't think of it again. Whereas some of the other albums, I'll put it on, I'll listen to it, and I'll keep coming back to it. When I'm thinking about music, I'll be like, oh yeah, Selling England by the Pound, or oh, Nursery Cryme is underrated, all that jazz. So for me, I think I'm going to have to say that for its kind of, again, if I was being a hipster, I'd put this in 3 and I'd put Trick down. But I've got to be objective here, and I do listen to Trick of the Tail a lot more, and I do think it's just a better record overall. So I'm putting it in the Shadow Realm. However, if there was a 4th spot, I think I'd put Wind Wuthering there. Again, above Foxtrot and above Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. But for me, I just think that, again, it's like Desert Island, right? You don't want the same thing over and over again. And if Wind Wuthering was in that 4th spot, I'd have a different tone. I'd be able to listen to Blood on the Rooftops, all that sort of stuff. But I don't have 4 spots because of the arbitrary style in which I've designed this video. So let's just do the ceremonial last spin. So Nursery Cryme is the second Genesis album that I really got into. I got into Selling England by the Pound like really deeply. And I played the absolute bananas out of that record. And I have a rule. I don't really go out of my way to look for records. I'm not going to go online and buy a record because I want it. I'm not going to go into a record store and go, do you have this record? No, I have a list in my head of albums that if I see them, I buy them. It does get me in a bit of financial trouble with my fiance, that all of a sudden I'll be like, hey honey, I spent $90 on records that I shouldn't have, but it's just how I work. If I see it and I need it, I buy it. And again, I know need is a very, very poor choice of words when it comes to buying vinyl. But the second one that I found was Nursery Cryme, and I think it solidified Genesis as one of my favorite bands because I was simply blown away by the fact that it wasn't a flash in the pan for me, that it wasn't, oh, okay, this is their weird English themed record. Maybe the rest of it, like my experience with Trespass, was going to be a little too noodly, a little less focused, the musicianship not up to the same standard that I want. But Nursery Cryme was a joy. I listened to it. I really liked it. And I think by digging my heels in a way, I've kind of grown a bit of an unhealthy love for the album, because whenever I hear people talk about Nursery Cryme, it's kind of like second shelf Genesis. It's kind of like, oh, you know, it's fine. You know, it's the first album they did with the traditional lineup. And I roll my eyes because I'm like, no, well, it's the first time that they've made like proper magic together. So it needs to get a bit more of a better rep than that. And yeah, so for me, from a purely personal perspective, it's number 2. I think the musicianship's great. I think it's the full lineup. And the album cover's fucking hilarious. So yeah, this is a little trial for me. I don't know if this is actually going to get released. And if it does get released, it's probably not going to get any views because it's really random and weird. But yeah, thank you for listening to or watching me rank the top 3 peak era Genesis albums. Just for closing up, I've got Selling England by the Pound at 1. I've got Nursery Cryme at 2, and I've got Trick of the Tail at 3. And if there was a 4th spot, I'd have Wind Wuthering there. I almost kind of want to do this, but I feel like if I'm doing a video for the first time and I want to do more like this, I feel like breaking the rules of the ranking so soon makes the whole point completely and utterly redundant. So thank you for watching.